and welcome to Navajo County Connection. Today I am joined by a couple of people from Public Works, and I will allow them the opportunity to introduce themselves, and we're going to talk a little bit about preparation for a snowstorm and some of the priorities of Navajo County in the way of transportation. So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Osgood. Mr. Osgood, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, John Osgood, Navajo County Public Works Director. And I've been in my current position since March of 2018.
So you're brand new, and John comes to us from Florida, which is completely different from, Arizona, Florida. We have the dry climate, nice heat, but certainly you don't get a lot of the snow. So that's a new challenge for you.
It sure is. And I spent the majority of my career with the city of Tempe, almost 29 years with the city of Tempe. And then, as you say, I had the opportunity to work in Coral Gables, Florida for about 2 years. And while we didn't have the snowstorms, we did have a major hurricane that I had the opportunity to help clean up after.
Yeah, so, that's something we don't see here in Arizona.
Right.
So, yeah.
At least the snow melts. The tree branches and all the limbs we had to move off and reduce and take away.
That could be pretty challenging. That's very true. And we have Mr. Denton joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Ricky Denton. I'm the highway maintenance manager and the building department manager. I've been with the county for 12 years now. Oh. So started as an inspector and then moved up through public works.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate the both of you joining us, and I know in working with the department and providing services through our communities and being able to prepare for snowstorms, that the department has done such a great job in not only overseeing the roadways that we're responsible for, but also with the partnerships with townships. That's very important to the work that we do. So in talking about that, what are some of the roles and responsibilities of the transportation department or public works?
So one thing just to start off, we have over 700 miles of roads that we are responsible for maintaining. About 45% of those are paved and 55% of them are unpaved. In terms of our snow removal operation, and actually for our maintenance operation in general, we have 3 staffed road yards. One in Show Low, one in Heber, and one in Holbrook. And we also have unstaffed yards in Taylor, Winslow, and Pine Top, where we stage equipment, stage material for different road projects and for our snow response operation. And we have about 16 what we call blades or motor graders. And 11 cinder spreaders. The blades, though, are used. Probably, you tell me, it's one of our core. It's probably our core piece of equipment. That and the 10-wheel dumps.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So, as I said, we almost have 60% of our roads are unpaved. So those blades get a workout, and we use them all the time for normal road maintenance, just routine kind of planned maintenance, and we also use them during our snowstorms, our emergency response. I think I mentioned we have 11 cinder spreaders with snow plows on the front, and they're deployed during our snow events. In terms of what we actually do during those storm events, we rely a lot on cinders, and it's my understanding in the past we used to use different types of material to put down on the road for traction and ice melt, and we still use some salt in some certain cases to de-ice or melt ice in really shady areas. But for the most part, we use the cinders on hills, in intersections, for traction.
And I know that there was a lot there in a sense of the types or the amount of roadways that's available or that you oversee, and the materials and the, I guess, those things that you use to be able to help the roadways. So when we think about over 700 miles of roadway, how do you prioritize what that looks like on an annual basis?
So based off of it's based off our snow policy that's been adopted by the county, and so it's we prioritize by what we consider bus routes and main routes, which are collector streets or like our county highways. Mm-hmm. So during a snow event, that's where we concentrate. Is those areas because they're main arteries. Mm-hmm. So and they're primarily used by emergency services. If someone during one of these events has a 911 call, then we have those main county highways open so they can get to those areas that they need to get to. So
when you think about not only just snow systems coming through, so in prioritization of maintenance of those particular roads. So I'm guessing those roads get a lot of attention, a lot of emphasis because they're main thoroughfares or busways or ambulatory assistants are looking to be able to utilize those roads.
Right.
And so outside of that, how do you begin to create, what does the schedule look like for the 700 odd miles of roadway?
Daunting. Because it's a lot, it's a lot of different types of surfaces that we have to contend with, from gravel to pavement, as well as the travel miles, or trying to think of the proper way to say it, vehicle use, because some of our roads will exhibit more traffic than others will, and so of course it causes it to wear differently. So we of course we just do a lot of inspections and we have to put kind of the boots out there on the ground to take a look at it and see how to properly maintain those surfaces.
And I appreciate that. I think sometimes there's a misassumption about, the amount of roadway that we're responsible for. And when you hear 700 miles, that's quite a hefty number. And being able to think about the resources that we have available to us, dollars and other resources, being able to maintain 700 miles on an annual basis can be daunting. So how do you as a organization look at that? And I think that's important. So I appreciate you saying that, and being able to go out and being able to assess what that looks like. And I know that there's a schedule that's created, and so the roads can accurately be maintained. And it's an important part of not only our roadways, but in townships and there are local Arizona highways. That's something that we continually have those conversations around maintenance and upkeep. So
yes, and Ricky's team, he touched on this, but they do annual inspections, and we do a condition analysis of the different types of roads, the arterial streets, the collector streets, the residential streets, and the primitive roads. And Ricky and his team have a plan that when we come to you at budget time with our capital requests, you'll see that there's a list of streets that we recommend are ready for their maintenance treatment, whatever that may be. It might be a slurry seal. We crack seal to prevent rain and moisture to get under the surface of the street into the base, which causes failures. So we have a pretty robust pavement management program, and it's one that we want to continue to build on and really be able to show residents at some point, a map of where we're going to be, and kind of take the mystery out of where we do our maintenance work. And we want to do the right treatment on the right road at the right time.
And I didn't mean to throw you off with that question, because we were planning to talk about specifically snowstorms, but I know that in conversations that I would have with community members, that's a large bulk of the question about, or in thinking about, well, when is my roadway going to be serviced? How do you maintain my roadway? What does that look like? Am I on the ticket for 5 years down the road, or whatever it might be?
Right.
So just giving a depiction of what that looks like. And I think that communication is important, so I appreciate hearing that and being able to help our community members better understand what that looks like.
Thank you. And just one last thing on the roads. I mentioned we have 700 miles that we're responsible for maintaining, but we probably have 2,000 or 3,000 other miles that are private or have not been brought up to county standards that we don't maintain. So sometimes we get questions like that from the public as well. Well, why aren't you maintaining my road? And usually the answer is because it's not hasn't been brought into our maintenance system.
And we were just having that discussion before we started about jurisdiction. So, you know, jurisdiction could fall under several categories. We could fall under the state, it could fall under township, it could fall under the county. And then if we have roadways that aren't marked, so like the Navajo Nation struggles with that in a sense because they have a lot of dirt roads. And so, you know, being able to maintain those roads with the Navajo Nation's ADOT system, you know, that becomes cumbersome as well. So just understanding jurisdiction of roadways is something that community members, you know, we talk about, and especially during snowstorms, this question comes up a lot. You know, why isn't my roadway being maintained when there's a storm system? So I think that's important. Yeah. So when we're getting ready for a storm, what happens?
So we start preparing probably in the fall with, go ahead.
Well, no, I didn't want to cut you off, John. Sorry. So John's right. Actually, usually about July we start.
Even late summer.
So as soon as we're done with parades, then we go right into that, you know, and so we start trying to get ready. A lot of it is you know, getting the equipment set up. So like getting the plows put on the trucks, getting the cinder spreaders put on the trucks. And then the other side of it is the blades, you know, the getting those ready, making sure operationally that they're sound, they're operating correctly and functioning. And then we just kind of wait, you know, we go on our normal duties and then when it finally approaches and we have those storms, then for us, because we're spread out so far, you know, because basically we're going from like Winslow to Pine Top, it's staging, you know, getting the equipment out there and getting it in the areas, because we have places that we can stage the blades throughout the county as well as the unmanned road yards. We're able to park trucks there and house them in facilities so they don't freeze up and they're easier to start. And you know, typically we just, it's forecasted and then we wait. Myself and other staff members will go out before the storm is actually, you know, when it's predicted, and we just wait and it's kind of a waiting game after that and see what it does.
Paying attention to the weather and watching the Weather Channel. And
speaking of that, one of the thing that's been most helpful to me as someone who hasn't managed snowstorms in a 30-year career until I got here is the National Weather Service out of Flagstaff provides us with updates and forecasts, as Ricky said, and you know, several days in advance, so we have time to not only the preparations that are already made, but we have time to, you know, to think about when the storm's supposed to hit. They give us 72-hour blocks where they can predict about how much snow we'll get and about when it'll start. I'm not sure historically how that's been, but since I've been here, those reports have been very accurate, I find. Ricky and some of the other veterans will tell me, though, it's Mother Nature. When Mother Nature decides to snow, that's when it's going to snow, and sometimes the forecasts, as good as they are, they're not, you know, we can't go by them solely. And one thing I'll say about Ricky, too, I want to say this to him. I tell him every snowstorm, but I really appreciate he and his team. And Ricky is out there, whether it's 1 a.m. or 4 a.m., depending on when it starts, and he's monitoring. He's out in his truck. He's driving different parts of the county. He's on the radio. He's working with his road supervisors to make sure that they're ready to go and what's actually happening as opposed to what's forecasted. And he briefs me, gives me updates. Last year we had the major snowstorm in February where there was a state of emergency called, and Ricky was providing those updates. It allowed me to update our executive management team, and who then could inform the board as we went along. So I really appreciate the work that you and your team do, right up and of course before the storm, and then during the storm.
Thank you, and they're a good group, so it'd be nothing without them. So.
I'm sure the public feels the same way. You know, there's nothing like a snowstorm and you look out your window and know that you're going to have to shovel your driveway and wondering what the roadways are going to be like on your commute to school, to work. So, you know, I think it's one of those things where we take for granted that, you know, we're just going to get in our car and the roads have been plowed and we're ready to go. And there's a lot of work and a lot of the behind the scenes things that are happening in order to make that happen. And that might be a person being up at 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it is to be able to ensure that those roadways are overseen and that people are being able to drive those roadways. So when we think about major snowstorms, is there anything different that you do rather than just a snowstorm that's coming?
You know, I wished I could say, it's kind of funny, it's usually, no, we just kind of wait for it to hit. You know, we'll sit down and we have like these great plans and what we want to do, and then we all leave with, you know, me and my group, we leave with, well, we'll see what it does, and then we'll adjust it from there.
Right.
And 9 times out of 9, we adjust it from there because it's sometimes it's not what we anticipate, and so we just let the storm come in and try to get a good feel for it and see how we're going to go from there. So
I think this goes back to the comment of letting Mother Nature tell you what it's going to be like. There are times where you can't determine or you can't dictate what that looks like.
Right.
So your team, how many members is that? And back to the equipment, it might have been stated earlier, but what are the number of, I guess, equipment that's available?
So we have roughly 16 blades, and then of course the 11 cinder spreaders. We'll also do we have like loaders, and then we have backhoes, and then we have some pickups that we put plows on to help with the process, especially like our cleanup process if it's a real heavy snow. We have I've got about 36 guys. Wow. So and then they're broke up through, like, you know, I've got road yard supervisors, and then we have foremans in each one of the road yards, and then we have senior operators and then operators. I deal primarily, you know, during these storms, it's myself and the road yard supervisors, and we're meeting and we're talking and stay in constant contact with each other, so that way we know if one road yard needs our support, then we can provide that support to them. So we have old equipment, and so we're trying to update it, and it breaks, it goes down. So we may have a blade go down in Sholo, and Holbrook is really good to be right there to provide that support and send somebody over. Heber may get more than they can handle because we've got a small group there, and Holbrook is always ready to send 2 guys over there and help them get those areas addressed.
Yeah, so. And I think even the communication with townships and helping to, I know that there are some areas where there might be several entities who have jurisdiction, so that communication becomes really important. Because you don't want to duplicate services or forget about particular roadways that might need that service. So an individual who's out on the roadway plowing, how many miles do you think they might put in on a given day or night?
It depends. You know, I always say that our plow drivers, they're the backbone, because they're usually the first guys that we call out. And you know, per our policy, it's like our county highways, and they're long stretches. They can be 10, 20 miles long, and blades are just too slow to be able to respond and keep those roadways open. So we look at our plow truck drivers to come out and do that and stay and keep that road maintained, keep it wide enough, and that way we can keep traffic and keep the services going. We can clock, I think I've had guys tell me they've clocked, you know, a good 100, 200 miles in one storm. So I know in the blades, especially in our rural areas, kind of like the routes and stuff that I cover, you know, it's close to 50 miles. So I'm not that good. I'm pretty slow. So and I always end up in the oldest piece of equipment. So I do about 20, 25 miles, but some of my guys in the better equipment, yeah, they've done close to 50 miles in a blade, and that's a lot of miles in a blade.
It's so interesting
really
to me when you see the size of these blades and you stand next to them, or you see the size of the road that the blade has to maneuver in some of these residential areas in the primitive. It's remarkable the skill that the operators have to have with the conditions they're in. It's dark, it's snowing, their side windows are fogged up, and there's not much room for error. So hearing that they can do 25 or 30 miles, I can see the plow person out on the main road being able to do that, but it's remarkable that the conditions in some of the road configurations that they have to operate in under those tough conditions.
Skill behind that. And I think that leads me to the next question. The public, how can the public help you?
Ricky, you got to be able to answer this one.
First thing I always say is stay home. You know, it's you know, we make those announcements a lot, and it's for everybody's safety, really, because they're harsh conditions, and you know, we're in these big pieces of equipment, and it's like, you know, even sometimes when we're operating them, we're like, oh, we're unstoppable, and then you get on ice, and then you realize all of a sudden this giant piece of equipment becomes really small, and you realize, you know, how small you are and how much bigger the storm is. So that's how come we always say, you know, if you can, limit your travel, stay home, you know. Some other things too,
don't park on the street.
Another one, kind of a sore subject for a lot of our residents, trash cans. Trash cans a lot of times will get out in the roads, and we always ask that, you know, you try to set those back on the edge of asphalt so we don't hit them. So and at times, unfortunately, we do. So.
And I would say, I was just going to add one last thing. You touched on it, but stay back from the equipment. It's out there for a reason, to make the street safer, and sometimes people pass. For some reason, pass a plower. Even if they don't pass, if they get too close, as Ricky said, they're on ice sometimes. They could slip back, or the cinders could, you know, spray out and cause a cracked windshield and that type of thing. So just those kind of common sense things. Let the equipment do its job and stay as clear as possible from that.
I think that's important for us to, as community members, to understand. You know, there's the other part of it too. You know, and part of my job is getting some of those complaints, and a complaint might be a snow berm, and you know, and this I think is a small payment for the individuals who have to be out on the road and plowing the roads. So if I have a snow berm in front of my home, when I have to get out and I have to shovel a little bit, I'm okay with that. So I hope our community members, that they're okay with that too, because when we think of the long hours that your team puts in and the amount of work that it requires, it certainly is a small inconvenience to be able to get back out on the roadways. So I appreciate the work that you do and your team and all those who are invested in making sure that we're prepared. It sounds like we're well prepared when we're preparing in July and getting ready for the snowstorms. And I know that a big part of that is preparing the equipment, making sure the equipment is maintained, purchasing the right products, getting our cinders ready and so forth. So I appreciate that. Are there any other comments that you'd like to make?
Just a few things related to our snow policy, and just to let the residents know, we do have a snow policy procedures that we follow, and typically, per our policy, we typically don't start pushing the snow until we have 4 inches.
Yes, 4 inches.
That's not to say we're not out there. We might be cindering, but we'll plow it at 4 inches. On some of the bigger storms, we'll do what we call an initial pass to come through and open up the roadway so that at least emergency vehicles can get through, and people that have to get out, as Ricky said, if you don't have to get out, don't get out. But if you have to, at least in that initial pass, when's that? Is that like the first 12 hours or even
yes,
less?
That's usually the first 12 hours. Yeah.
So we want to just make sure that emergency vehicles and people can travel if they have to in a safe manner. I think you've told me that 24 to 48 hours later, we'll start to then open the roads up wider and get out to the shoulders of the roads. It's at that point that we can, if we have the manpower available, if somebody calls us and says, "Look, I can't manage the berm on my own. Can you help?" It's at that point that I think we would take that information down, and as our resources are available, we try to help with some of those bigger berms where people can't get out. But as you said, it's in the midst of a storm. It's I don't know if it's impossible, but it's pretty close to impossible to not berm, not leave a windrow. And
the snow has to go somewhere.
It has to go somewhere. That's right. It has to go somewhere.
I certainly appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today about snow preparation, how the public can be of a support and what they can do. And certainly we want everybody to be safe during those snowstorms. And we appreciate the work that you do, and we certainly appreciate the partnerships that we have with our local townships to ensure that all of our roadways are ready and drivable. So as you're driving out in the snow season, make sure that you are safe, and that if you have any questions, I know that Public Works is always open to answering those questions and helping our public. So please feel free to give them a call, and thank you for joining us today.